All right, it's really great to be here at Cryptolina, and some of you, I'm going to do just a quick introduction in case you guys don't know who I am. I'm the new community manager at Airbitz, but you also may know me from my work with Bitcoin Not Bombs and antiwar.com. And I want to just kind of explain that I come from the activist side of things. I am not a techie person. When I first heard about Bitcoin, actually, I worked at a precious metals brokerage firm called Roberts and Roberts. And we were very skeptical when we first heard about Bitcoin, as were a lot of people in the precious metals industry. And for good reason. I think you should be skeptical of new technologies, generally speaking. But I kept hearing about it from my kind of more radical friends, and I really wanted to know what it was about. So I just kind of started studying it, and I started realizing that this technology was more than just a currency. It could do so many things as far as whether it was helping activists or helping people who were unbanked. And so it was kind of those parts of Bitcoin that really appealed to me. And so I got my start with Bitcoin Not Bombs, which came out of an alliance with antiwar.com. And the reason antiwar.com started taking Bitcoin was it was revealed to them that the FBI was spying on them, which is a very scary situation to be in. And from a financial perspective, it's hard for you to raise money and continue to survive as a nonprofit if the government's spying on you. So a lot of their donors got kind of freaked out by this and backed away. So the folks at Bitcoin Not Bombs encouraged antiwar.com to start using Bitcoin, and that allowed them to kind of survive and make it through some of their funding problems. So this was really great. And around the same time this happened, WikiLeaks also had their donations cut off by PayPal, and they started taking Bitcoin. So I saw it as, a very interesting technology, and it's something that I think will truly be world changing. And another thing that I kind of realized, when you kind of broaden your perspective outside of the US and you kind of think, on a global level, is this technology is useful for, building communications and building relationships with people all around the world. So I want to talk a little bit about a topic that we don't always hear about in this space, and this is going to be kind of more of like a philosophical talk and less of a technical talk, and that's empathy. So first of all, what is empathy? It's the ability to place yourself in the shoes of another and grok their struggles, their triumphs, their love, and their pain. It's not pitying, but rather edifying. It's what makes us human beings instead of human doings, because we're not automated, but rather deeply connected to each other through the shared experience of existing. So a lot of people would say that, and you can read articles about this, it's been theorized that technology separates us from each other and that it actually decreases empathy. And that's interesting. And as someone who kind of grew up with the internet and grew up with technology, I realized that there are some dark aspects to it. I've been to some of the darker corners of the internet, and it can be a scary place. Because the human heart can be this cavernous place of hurt that spews hatred as a cover for hurt and hides behind a mask of anonymity. So some even argue that we're physically disconnected from each other, blocked by screens and distracted by the allure of long-distance connections. And I don't know if that's the case. I'd argue that it's because we're desperate for deep connections with people that we fear missing out on ones that may not be in our immediate presence. Now, obviously, I think there's a bit of an etiquette issue here if you're, if you're on your cell phone the whole time while hanging out with people. But I still think it does come from a deep longing of wanting to connect and a kind of fear of missing out. And, again, whether or not this is proper etiquette is another debate, but this is something that I've experienced on a personal level. So growing up, I was a bit of an outcast. I was a kind of a weird kid. I didn't really understand social cues well. I had a hard time connecting with other kids. And, I read a lot of books. I kind of got picked on a lot. So I escaped into the world of books and then later the internet. And I found a lot of like-minded people that made me feel like I really belonged. And I think this has been the experience with a lot of millennials. So this has been really great because, you're able to forge these relationships with people all over the world. Whereas before, we've been kind of limited by, the ability to travel. So, having these connections limited by location has been the way the world has worked throughout most of history. And as we've broadened the scope of our relationships through the ability to physically travel, more and more people have been able to connect and share in the trials and celebrations of people, sometimes very far away from where they grew up. And now we're able to virtually travel almost anywhere in the world. And I think it's only a matter of time before this experience can be shared by everyone, regardless of locale. So the ability to connect with others across the world who share varying interests has had profound effects on global human flourishing. When we instantly see how others around the world are surviving on this big, great floating rock through space, it inspires feelings of brotherhood and togetherness and all of these good feels. So we live in this age where tragedy or triumph can be seen by millions of people in the click of a button. And it's created international tribes joined together through niche interests. So the centralized concept of a nation state kind of seems more absurd every day when we see the natural instinct of people to organize across borders based on common interests. And as our communications have become decentralized, we've seen more services arise to meet this need. And access to these programs is increasing at rapid rates. It's not everywhere yet. There are some places that are disconnected from certain parts of the world, but as technology spreads, we find that throughout history, it really can't be stopped past a certain point. And this is important because the ability to control a population becomes challenged. It becomes threatened when technology spreads and these opportunities to connect with each other increase. Now, decentralized technology is already being used to address a lot of social issues and social problems, but why decentralization? The simple answer, I think, is power. And understanding how empathy between people decreases and unequal power dynamics is crucial in understanding and addressing social issues. I think this is pretty obvious stuff. Those in higher positions of power don't have to regard the feelings of subordinates, and those in lower power positions feel less able to challenge wrongdoings. So power dynamics are a part of life. They exist in just about every interaction we have, and they're even more pronounced when that power becomes centralized. And by challenging these power dynamics using decentralized tech, we may not achieve total equality, that's not really my point, but we can create a more caring playing field. Inequity and therefore decreased empathy thrives in centralized systems. And when we have these institutions controlling our finances, our reputations, our ability to connect with others, then they undoubtedly benefit from retaining this locus of control. And these institutions are primarily concerned with self-preservation through centralization. And again, that's not to say that decentralization is without its challenges. It does have its drawbacks, as is any idea. But it can accommodate the needs of many diverse communities with different value systems. And also, when it comes to finances, the ability to send money or value anywhere in the world democratizes currency. Competing currencies, by their very nature, decentralize the power the nation states can have over trade. And history has shown how free trade naturally leads to greater human flourishing for all parties. The more we interact with each other, even through simple transactions, even through bartering or just transacting with one another, the more we can become connected on an empathic level to our fellow people. The internet is borderless, and I believe the future will be too. We're seeing this happen a lot, especially in Bitcoin, and it's something that keeps me really highly motivated in the space, is seeing the deep concern that Bitcoiners and the larger decentralized tech community have for others across the world. And so, for example, we no longer live in a time where our tribe is limited by jurisdiction. They're kind of worldwide now. So when we see footage of, say, natural disasters, we can mobilize, we can use those feelings of sadness to help people. And one of my favorite examples I like to use, it happened a couple of years ago with the mutual aid charity Free Aid. And there was a typhoon in the Philippines. It was extremely disastrous, as some of you may remember. And there were a lot of aid organizations that were able to make it out there. And a lot of them were using PayPal to take donations. And Free Aid was too, but they were also accepting Bitcoin. And at one point, now Free Aid is a much smaller aid organization, but at one point, PayPal cut off their funding for some kind of arbitrary reason, and they didn't really give them much of a warning. They just said, okay, your donations are being cut off now. And this is an aid organization's trying to help people. But what happened, they were still taking Bitcoin, and when the Bitcoin community found out about this, it actually increased Bitcoin donations to them. So they came in, they helped out free aid, and that funding allowed free aid to reach remote parts of the Philippines that these larger aid organizations couldn't reach. So this is a really, really awesome example of the power of Bitcoin and the power of having a currency that can't be stopped by any centralized organizations. And Bitcoin succeeded where PayPal failed because you can't stop the signal. Now, while I try to temper my enthusiasm with a good dose of realism, because obviously that's really important, the tenacity of the human mind to learn and create sometimes really trips me up. So more realistic people have brought up the point that that less developed countries have little use for technology. And I think there are some really valid criticisms here that, we're not quite there yet. We're not, I guess I like to live in the future a lot. And, I see, and I think a lot of us do too. We see what can be. And, we want to live there. And we're just like, we want this now. Like human flourishing now. But, there's still a lot of work to be done. There's still a lot of development that needs to be done. And, I think it's increasing. But yeah, there's still work to be done. But I have another really cool example for you. I'm reminded of the story a few years ago. Some of you may have heard of the One Child, One Laptop project. And this was back in 2012. What they did is they dropped off a bunch of Android tablets to a village in Ethiopia to children who couldn't read or write and had never used technology before. And they dropped them off in sealed boxes, and they weren't really sure what the kids were going to do with it. Some people were even like, I don't know, are they just going to not open the door? Are they going to just play with the boxes? What's going to happen? So, well, obviously the kids opened it up. There were no instructions, by the way. There was, no indication of, how to use these tablets that were dropped off. So this is awesome because within 5 days, the kids were using 47 apps per child per day. Within 2 weeks, they were singing ABC songs in English in the village, and within 5 months, they'd hacked Android. Now, these were very basic tablets that had several features disabled. And they hacked them, things like cameras. They hacked the cameras and were taking pictures of each other. And this blows my mind because I'm not a hacker. I'm still, my technical level of understanding is, it's gotten much better since I've gotten into Bitcoin. But I can't even imagine doing that. It's like, it just blows my mind. And these kids had done it, and they couldn't even read or write. So when I hear these criticisms, while they are really valid, I just think of these kids and it's like, don't try to tell me that, people around the world can't use this technology if these kids in Ethiopia are using these tablets and hack them too, with like no instruction. So yeah, and I think it especially comes down to the right platform too. So it's really inspiring stories. So there's free aid, there's One Child, One Laptop, there are a lot of great organizations out there helping people, but individuals are also empowered to help other individuals through this technology. And there's been research that's shown that when we have more of a choice in the way we donate to people, we tend to donate more. And instead of relying on state-funded aid organizations, we can engage in voluntary transactions. And this is a big deal. People do want to help each other. People love to help each other because I think a lot of us can see that we're more similar than we are different. Now, decentralization is at the core of Bitcoin, and while some organizations want to sacrifice it for ease of use to resemble legacy systems, and that's understandable, others realize the value of keeping Bitcoin decentralized. And while teaching others about the benefits of using Bitcoin to send financial assistance across the world, it can be really challenging to get someone up to speed on the security requirements that they'll need. It's hard for them to be empowered, financially if their funds can be easily lost or stolen. The learning curve is a hurdle, even in, the first world, used to instant safe transactions where centralized organizations hold the user information in the event of password mismanagement. So generational and educational differences can cause hurdles too. People want things to be easy. This is something achieved by tech giants, but sometimes elusive to the security-oriented Bitcoin space. And this rang really true for me. I became really discouraged for a while when I was getting people started with Bitcoin, because the more I learned about security, the more it became important that I follow through completely on a more deep level with someone that I set a wallet up with. I didn't want to just set someone up with a wallet and send them a couple dollars worth of Bitcoin only to have it be lost or stolen. That's not really empowering, and if people lose their money, they're not going to be likely to use a currency that can be easily lost or stolen. So I got kind of bummed out for a while because there wasn't a really easy way to do to do security. And I wanted them to really truly understand it. But the thing is, a lot of people didn't want to take that time. There were several people that I was like, let's sit down. Let's it's going to take maybe an hour or so, like depending on who it is, to get you up to date to protect yourself. And people just don't have that time. It's very difficult to kind of explain the reason for numerous passphrases and this idea that you definitely don't want to lose your password or forget your password, because once it's gone, it's gone. Again, people are used to losing their passwords and being able to send an email and have their password reset. So, and a friend of mine, a radio host named Ernie Hancock, was a frequent critic of Bitcoin. He had me on his show numerous times, and he had other really prominent Bitcoiners on too. They were way smarter than me about the security aspects, and he would just kind of hammer us. And he's a friend of mine, but he would really push us. He was like, listen, this is just too hard to do. There's just too many steps involved. And he started using this term that still kind of cracks me up, which is called the grandpa just button. And he's like, listen, if you want people to use this technology, you need one just button. You don't need this whole series of steps saying, oh, well, you just do this, and 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 you just do this. People kind of tune out after that. So he had a real point with this, and and then he did get some pushback. There are, I think, a pretty large portion of Bitcoiners who are like, well, people need to do that. People need to learn the hard parts of Bitcoin, and they just need to suck it up and do it. And I get that argument, but it's not realistic if we're wanting to grow this technology and get to where a lot more people are using it. So so he was skeptical of a lot of Bitcoin platforms because of their complexity. And when it comes to banking services, you just want ease of use and you want high security. And finally, he calmed down, and his criticisms were satiated when he discovered Airbitz, which I think I might start referring to as the grandpa just button of Bitcoin wallets. So here's where Airbitz comes in. I've been really impressed with how they've managed to balance ease of use with high security and privacy standards. And the fact of the matter is, people aren't going to take the time to learn about Bitcoin on a deep technical level to be able to protect themselves from theft. So I want everyone to be able to use this technology. I think it can vastly improve the lives of billions of people around the world. But it has to be easy to use. It has to be something that those unfamiliar with any kind of banking can use. Right now, a lot of us are lucky enough to have access to mobile banking, which is a very familiar it's a very familiar feeling, but there are a lot of unbanked people who have never even had that experience. So whether it's your grandfather or like a young child, it needs to be accessible for people of all ages and all educations and generations basically. So some features I like about the wallet are the expanding directory of merchants. I think one of the biggest criticisms people still kind of have, if they don't know that they can spend Bitcoin in a bunch of places, where can I spend it? What can I do with this weird, creepy internet money you just sent to me? So yeah, we have like an expanding directory of places to take Bitcoin, over, I believe, 100,000 merchants now, and that's expanding pretty rapidly. And we also try to vet them and make sure that they're actually taking Bitcoin, because sometimes it is easy to get someone set up with Bitcoin, but they're maybe not necessarily going to keep taking Bitcoin if they're not getting support from Bitcoiners. So another thing I like, and this kind of plays to the ease of mobile banking, and that's the ability to separate transactions into easily distinguishable categories. This is good for financial management. There's a feature on the app that allows you to add extra notes, and you can add transfer income, exchange, for tax purposes, for personal purposes. Regarding the taxing, you probably should be paying taxes on your Bitcoin. That's a philosophical question too. But also, I also like that the ease of use is combined with better privacy than a Swiss bank. And as you know, this is a service that's limited to a very small percentage of people. And I believe that those kinds of standards should be accessible to everyone. High privacy standards can be for everyone, not just those who can afford it. So because of how we've applied peer-to-peer decentralized storage to our platform, there's also no single point of failure. So if our servers go down, you can still access and send funds through the app. You can also easily recover your password if you forget by going into your settings and setting up a list of security questions. And this is, I think a lot of people are also familiar with this feature, when you're logging into sites that require, that have sensitive personal information. You want to set up extra questions to be able to recover your information if something happens. So gone are the days of these kind of lengthy passphrases that can be lost easily along with your funds. Airbitz believes that financial services should be available worldwide without the reliance on legacy systems. And because of this worldwide focus, I think we stand in sharp contrast to centralized systems that really have no incentive to make their services accessible to lesser advantaged people. So while our platform has a feel of mobile banking, we're not a Bitcoin bank, and we will be partnering with third parties so that we can scale faster. And one of the things that we'll be rolling out soon is buy-sell functionality. So you'll be seeing that coming out in the UK probably in about a month or so, and in the US shortly after that, and it will also be expanded to the Philippines, Mexico, and Canada. So by going outside of the US, we hope to broaden access to financial services, and by prioritizing security, we'll ensure that user data is protected. We're also working to expand our expertise outside of some financial services too. And I can't give away all of our secrets, but we do have some really cool things that we'll be working on in the coming months and year. So we don't want control over your funds, basically, because we believe that there is inherent power inequity in this banking systems today. Obviously, going back to the empathy and power dynamics, that's going to be an issue. We're less connected when centralized institutions are between us and cutting off our ability to communicate and send funds, which is a form of communication. So really, how when a bank can control how much of your money you own, or how much of your own money you can withdraw, as they're doing in Greece and other countries, then do you really have control over it? A phrase that we use in the precious metals industry is, if you don't hold it, you don't own it. And the same is true for any type of money. But much like Uber owns no cars and Airbnb owns no homes, Airbitz aims to be a financial platform that owns no money. Are we starry-eyed idealists? Maybe. But as Paul Graham has said, live in the future and build what's missing. And there's no time I'd rather live in. And with a focus on what's possible, we hope to build what will be. Because when power is decentralized down to the individual level, we collectively thrive more, and empathy flows through channels unable to be stopped by any centralized organizations, financial or not.